The masses have seldom craved truth. As the 19th century social psychologist Gustave Le Bon observed, people often prefer illusions that comfort over truths that disturb. They are easily misled, especially by those who master the art of manipulation. The true danger lies not in lies themselves, but in our collective willingness to embrace them. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, echoed this sentiment. He warned that humanity's gravest threats come not from nature or disease, but from within, from our own psyche. He argued that when mental illness becomes normalized in a society, it leads to what he called a psychic epidemic. Jung wrote in Civilization in Transition that man is a greater threat to himself than any external catastrophe. It is not famine, not earthquakes, not microbes, not cancer, but man himself, who is man's greatest danger to man. Why? Because unlike natural disasters, there is no adequate protection against mass psychosis. A mass psychosis is essentially an epidemic of madness that spreads through a society when a significant number of individuals lose touch with reality. This condition is not a myth or a fringe idea. History offers chilling examples. The European witch hunts of the 16th and 17th centuries and the rise of totalitarian regimes in the 20th century. During the witch trials, panic and delusion consumed entire communities. Thousands of innocent people, mostly women, were tortured and killed based on fabricated accusations. As Francis Hill noted, some Swiss villages were left with almost no women after the hysteria subsided. The psychological toll of mass psychosis is profound. Jung noted that those affected by such collective madness become morally and spiritually degraded. Rationality, emotional stability, and personal responsibility vanish. Individuals engulfed in the groupthink commit atrocities they would never consider alone. The most terrifying aspect is that victims of mass psychosis often don't realize they are affected. Just as a mentally ill person cannot easily recognize their own condition, neither can a society in the grip of collective delusion. But what causes such widespread psychosis? To understand this, we must first examine the conditions under which individuals lose their sanity. While drug abuse or physical trauma can induce madness, our focus is on psychological causes, specifically fear and anxiety. The most common psychogenic trigger of psychosis is overwhelming fear or anxiety. This emotional flood leads to a state of panic, which the mind naturally tries to escape. Some people respond by confronting and overcoming their fears. Others, however, undergo what is known as a psychotic break. A psychotic break is a restructuring of reality. It is not necessarily chaotic, but often appears ordered, albeit based on delusions rather than truth. As psychiatrist Silvano Arietti explained in his work Interpretation of Schizophrenia, individuals in this state may experience a sudden insight that helps them make sense of their fear through a distorted lens. This delusional insight allows them to regain a sense of control. However, it comes at the cost of losing touch with reality. The psychotic mind substitutes comfort for truth. Now, if this can happen to one person, it can happen to many. A mass psychosis emerges when a significant portion of a population is driven into panic by real or fabricated threats and collectively succumbs to delusion. The form this takes can vary depending on historical and cultural context. But in the modern era, the most dangerous manifestation is totalitarianism. Arthur Verse Lewis described it as centralized power paired with the erasure of individual rights. In a totalitarian state, people are reduced to two categories, the rulers and the ruled. This structure breeds pathology. The ruling class assumes godlike authority, while the population becomes infantilized, passive, and submissive. Hannah Arendt noted that totalitarianism seeks to reshape human nature itself, a doomed experiment that breeds only conformity and decay. Joost Meerloo, a Dutch psychiatrist who studied life under fascism and communism, likened totalitarian societies to schizophrenic minds. He argued that both suffer from disordered thought, fear-driven behavior, and a loss of identity. Totalitarianism is sustained by delusions, grandiose illusions of control, obedience, and purpose. It requires a population willing to trade their autonomy for security and leaders who believe they alone can engineer utopia. It is a union of power and pathology. So how does a society fall into this condition? The process typically begins with fear. Fear is the soil in which mass psychosis grows. Through waves of terror, cyclical bursts of fear followed by brief calm, populations are softened up. Each wave lowers resistance until people beg for order, even at the expense of their freedom. Mirlu called this technique menticide, or the killing of the mind. It is a deliberate strategy to overwrite individual thought with the dogma of the ruling elite. By bombarding people with conflicting reports, false data, and disinformation, the authorities disorient the public. As confusion rises, rationality falters, making the population more susceptible to control. Logic, as Mirlu said, can be met with logic, but illogic confounds. The big lie, when repeated often enough, bypasses reason and appeals to emotion. The more absurd the propaganda, the more effective it becomes. In today's digital age, tools like smartphones, social media, and AI-driven algorithms have supercharged this process. These technologies allow for constant exposure to curated information, while dissent is quickly censored. The result? A society inundated with narratives it cannot verify or question. People become addicted to their own manipulation. As Mirlu put it, modern technology teaches us to accept our world passively. Reflection, dialogue, and critical thinking are replaced with a flood of stimuli. The screen offers answers but no wisdom. Another tactic used to induce mass psychosis is isolation. When individuals are cut off from family, friends, and community, they become more vulnerable. Human beings are social creatures. Isolation not only causes emotional distress, but also removes the balancing force of alternative perspectives. Those who see through the delusion can act as anchors for others. But isolation weakens these lifelines. It is much easier to condition isolated individuals, as demonstrated by Pavlov's experiments with animals. Conditioning works best in quiet, controlled environments, exactly what enforced isolation creates. Alone and afraid, people become easy prey for menticide. The promise of safety in exchange for obedience becomes irresistible. Minds capable of reason are replaced with reactionary automatons. Eventually, the ruling elite offers a solution to the chaos they created. They promise order, unity, and peace, but only if people surrender their freedom, and many do. The price of freedom seems too high. Submission feels safer. But the order of a totalitarian society is pathological. It is an artificial stability that sacrifices spontaneity, creativity, and the human spirit. History shows us that such regimes do not lead to utopia, but to stagnation and death. So how do we resist? The antidote begins with the individual. Carl Jung argued that those who liberate themselves from collective madness become beacons of hope. They show that it is possible to live freely, even in an unfree world. Information is another tool. The truth must be spread to counter propaganda. Lies are fragile when exposed to light. Censorship thrives in darkness. Freedom demands transparency. Humor is also a powerful weapon. Totalitarians are notoriously humorless. Mockery undermines their authority. As Mirlu said, we must learn to treat demagogues with ridicule. Laughter deflates tyranny. Parallel structures offer yet another avenue. As Václav Havel suggested, we can create alternative systems within the totalitarian state, but morally outside it. These can be businesses, communities, or educational initiatives that reflect a different set of values. When enough of these parallel structures emerge, a second culture forms, an island of sanity within a sea of madness. It is in these spaces that freedom can be preserved and nurtured, but above all, action is required. The ruling elite does not rest. Their advance is deliberate and calculated. Our resistance must be equally purposeful. It will not be easy. As Thomas Paine said, tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered, but the struggle for freedom has always been a noble one. And if history has shown us anything, it is that even in the darkest times, there are those who resist, who endure, and who prevail. The battle for the mind of society is underway, and in this battle, Silence is not neutrality, it is surrender. To maintain our freedom, we must remain vigilant, courageous, and above all, awake.